Building in AI kill switches. Broadcom's checking up on some of their customers. Nutanix adds some support for NVIDIA. Cisco's quantum aspirations. There's some uncertainty in the IT market. Sudo or don't? That is the question. And we're going to take a look at the latest Futurum Group security research in this episode of the Tech Field Day Rundown. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Tech Field Day Rundown for Wednesday, May the 14th. My name is Tom Hollingsworth, and I'm very happy to be back with you. And I hope you're hungry because it is National Buttermilk Biscuit Day, and that's really the most superior form of biscuit, unless you're one of those weirdos that lives in England and you think that a biscuit is a sweet little cookie. But speaking of weirdos that don't live in England anymore, I'd like to introduce my co-host, Mr. Alistair Cook. Al, welcome to the show.
It is a pleasure to be here, and the thing that you call a biscuit, we call a scone, and buttermilk scones would be the English call scone. I'm in New Zealand, it's a scone here, mate. Buttermilk scone sounds good, and of course, it is also National Decency Day, so I hope everybody is wearing trousers today.
Well, the only decent way to eat a buttermilk biscuit, of course, is covered in gravy, thick, delicious gravy, just like the delicious stories that we have coming up for you this week. There's been some AI news and some quantum news and, some security news. So let's just dive right into it. Export restrictions to keep high-end NVIDIA chips from helping China build global domination don't seem to be working. Congressman Bill Foster wants to make NVIDIA build in a kill switch that will enable any chip that lands in the wrong place to be automatically disabled, either by some US government authority or pretty much whenever the AI feels like killing it. Now, I don't know about you, Al, but I'm trying to figure out what could possibly go wrong with a government mandated kill switch for an advanced technology.
Well, it seems like an echo of every other proposal that comes out of government, that some technology needs to be controlled, and so we'll just pass a law and magically things will be controlled. And that was my first feeling on this must just be somebody in government with no clue. But it turns out that Congressman Foster actually has a background in uh, chip design. And so has some basis for actually being able to think about whether this is practical or not. The idea here is that the export restrictions aren't working as well as you might hope, and that transshipping through mutually friendly locations and just generally dodgy trading is enabling these NVIDIA GPUs to get to places that the US would like them not to get to. Uh, China is the most often cited, but it's not the only location that is restricted for these things and is yet still able to get these things in. So a couple of elements in here. One we covered on the rundown before, which is that Huawei is building their own GPUs that are aiming to be competitive with the latest of the NVIDIA chips. And so this restriction may not actually be even beneficial to the US in restricting access to advanced technology. The Chinese scientists are building it. Uh, but I think the interesting part is this restriction being more about being able to disable the chip once it turns up in the wrong place. And Congressman Foster's ideas are not completely set in stone here. There was some geolocation suggestions about it. So if the chip turns up in a presumably GPS identified location, or possibly that it phones home, because NVIDIA chips are rather inclined to phone home and check for licensing. Well, if that phone home comes from a place that it shouldn't, of course, that could never be spoofed, could it? Then the kill switch could be activated. It seems a little far-fetched still, that this kill switch could be used. And then you've also got to consider whether exporting these chips to friendly nations might also be problematic if there's this kill switch capability. The United States could disable a currently friendly nation, Denmark or Canada, and disable their advanced AI tools because they had some designs on. Let's leave that alone. What we do see is NVIDIA is not a great fan of this. This would add additional complexity to their chips and involve far more government oversight of the actual silicon that's going on in their chips. And just the idea of the government being able to turn stuff off at will for whatever reason some government official, be they highly placed or lowly placed, chooses to switch off. It just feels a bit dangerous and, yeah, not really a free market kind of solution. Broadcom. Broadcom's transitioned all of the new sales, upgrades, and support renewals of the VMware products to a subscription basis in order to get that continuing return every month or every year. Some customers have chosen not to take these upgrades and to sit on their existing perpetually licensed VMware products. And this has led to VMware, well, Broadcom Legal sending letters to these customers saying, when your support agreement expired, your rights to download and install our patches expired. The letter suggests either purchasing a subscription, clearly the preferred option, or removing the patches that were released after the subscription renewal expired. Having seen a very large number of people at the Broadcom legal all hands meeting at a hotel I was at recently, um, does Broadcom really need to get all of these lawyers involved, Tom?
That depends on who at Broadcom thinks that they're going to get companies to pay up on this. Now, in full defense of Broadcom here, if the contract states that you are not allowed to download any patches that are not critical security updates, and you install a service pack or any of those other things that increases functionality or features or things like that, yeah, you did break the terms of the contract. So there's that. I think, though, that they might be better off with the carrot approach instead of the stick approach here. And the reason for that is because the customers may not understand that they don't have the rights to do that. They may think that this is like a Windows patch or something like that, that if it's out there and everybody else is installing it, I should be able to install it too. And again, it comes back to the way that the contract is worded. If the contract says you can't install anything at all, then that's the way that it's supposed to go. The question that I have for the people at Broadcom is, do you think that this approach is going to make people renew their support contracts? Do you think they're going to renew their support contracts at the levels that you want them to renew their support contracts at? Those two things are what you need to answer before you really pursue this. As near as I can tell, this has only affected a few companies so far. And I know that the R's story about it really kind of said, they're sending out these cease and desist letters to companies who their things have been out of support for like 6 days. Fair enough. That's probably a little quick. Maybe they're thinking that they can use this as a way to kind of, hey, you really do need to re up your support contract. But I also think that the other solution, honestly, would be to put basically a wall in front of all their patches and say you're only allowed to update these if you have a valid support contract. Maybe have the update system check for valid contract status before you allow them to upload patches. Would it be messy? Yeah, but you wouldn't have to be legally messy. You would just have to be support contract messy. I don't know that there is a good solution for this right now, unless there is some kind of amnesty set up where it's like, listen, if you guys will agree to sign a support contract for the next 6 months or year or what have you that will allow you to do this, maybe that's a way out for customers that want to stay on VMware. I worry though that the solution is if we're going to send you cease and desist letters, that's going to force people to say, well, if I can't install any security updates or software, then I guess I'm done using this and I'm going to migrate now. And that ultimately may be a bad turn for the people at Broadcom. Recently at Nutanix Next, the company Nutanix announced that they are going to be adding support for NVIDIA NIM and NeMo frameworks to Nutanix Enterprise AI. Adding AI and NVIDIA to any product will make it 10 times more fashionable and probably 20 times more expensive in the long run. But I guess the question that I have for you, Al, is the alphabet soup in the announcement. Does that mean there's something substantial behind all of this AI stuff, or is it just kind of marketing?
We heard about the Nutanix Enterprise AI solution in AI at AI Infrastructure Field Day a couple of weeks ago. And the aim here is to simplify getting a deployment of an AI solution, particularly on premises. Because as the Futurum Group studies have shown, there's not a really high success rate to fully DIY building your own AI solution. Um, about 60% fail to scale beyond the pilot stage, primarily because the return on investment isn't seen there. The huge amount of effort isn't actually returning a lot of business value. So, reducing the amount of effort that's required to build these solutions and to then operate these solutions is important. And this is where the NVIDIA frameworks step in. They are largely industry standard for building solutions on NVIDIA GPUs for AI. NIM is the inference microservices architecture. So, this is the architecture for deploying out an AI solution, both for a little bit of fine tuning and primarily for inference for the usually retrieval augmented generation type inference. This is definitely an architectural framework that makes it easier to build AI applications. Don't think it's actually easy, but it makes it easier to get through those cycles of building the application. I particularly like the Nemo framework, which includes things like guardrails around deployed models. And one of the common conversations we have both at AI infrastructure and at AI field day is around the safety and security of your AI solution. And Nemo is very much aimed at that safety part, making sure that you're putting controls around your AI solution, making sure that prompt poisoning and appropriate responses, we don't end up with maybe sexist language or inflammatory language coming out of these tools. Uh, the use of these frameworks, the use of these collection of tools from NVIDIA definitely is going to help customers build private AI solutions. And I think that's a significant thing. As I see the future of AI solutions, I can see large model training happening on public cloud. But then we're starting to think about where's the data that's going to actually feed the business application. If that data is on premises, you may well want to have your AI on premises as well. Of course, if the data is in the cloud, then maybe your AI is going to run in the cloud, and we saw plenty of options for that. So I think this is good. I think it is useful to have support for the broader set of frameworks that people are using to build their AI applications. And I did like that Nutanix is coming back to this idea of making the infrastructure invisible and allowing businesses to focus on the actual applications that are delivering their value. Cisco is making the leap into quantum networking, particularly in a big way. Last week, they announced new advances in quantum networking and a new lab set up to develop the technology. The hardware is a new chip developed in combination with UC Santa Barbara. The chip creates quantum entangled photons at room temperature, which is a good achievement. And then these quantum entangled photons can transmit data instantaneously, faster than the speed of light. Chip can create 200 million pairs of entangled photons per second and uses very minimal power. The second big announcement is the opening of a new quantum lab in Santa Monica. The goal of the new Cisco Quantum Lab is to investigate real world applications for quantum networking, both in quantum computing as well as traditional IT. Tom, are you now the superposition of two possible states that will collapse as soon as we observe you?
Well, I hope there's not an entangled version of me out there somewhere in the universe because God help that poor man. This is an exciting announcement for a lot of reasons because it means that we're starting to see more practical applications of these quantum solutions. And I love how Cisco kind of broke this down into we're doing quantum for quantum, but we're doing quantum for traditional too. Now, in the intro, Al, you did a great job of explaining essentially what you're doing in quantum networking is you're taking two photons and you're getting them to spin the same way. That means they're entangled. It means that they are identical copies of each other. So that when you separate them, what happens to one happens to the other because they're entangled. So that means that you can do things like transmit data across vast distances instantaneously, that you can create solutions for things that are like, for example, we had a great presentation last year from Cisco about quantum security, where you can effectively ensure that the key that you transmit to decrypt things can't be intercepted, because if it's observed before it arrives, then the entire system collapses and the key is invalid. But I think what was even more important was in the way that they were kind of releasing some of the details behind what they're doing. So this is something that we covered a couple weeks ago on the rundown. Remember when we had that quantum GPS thing where it was like, oh, well, we can read the using a quantum magnetometer to read, minute variations of the magnetic field, and it can tell you exactly where it's at. One of the reasons why that works is because of hyper precise timestamping. Can you think of another area where hyper precise timestamps can be important? I can. Wall Street. Being able to know exactly when a trade was executed down to, nanosecond technology or sub nanosecond technology could be valuable based on certain market conditions and things like that. But, you look at other things like being able to do quantum research into pharmaceuticals and healthcare. Well, that's a lot of data. Those huge data sets don't transmit easily, but if you have entangled quantum particles, then whatever you find out in the quantum particles in the computer would be instantaneously transmitted to research sites. Now, that's a lot of data. And 200 billion entangled photons per second sounds like a lot until you realize how many photons it takes to transmit data. And that means that these things are going to have to be, developed and increased and things like that. The value, I think, is that one, we're doing it at room temperature, which, if you don't know, modern quantum computers require them to be chilled close to absolute zero. So that's a lot of energy that's spent getting them where they need to be. But second of all, minimal power consumption, like milliwatt power consumption. That is big. And in case you don't know, a lot of this is done with lasers, which is one of the reasons why this lab was opened in Santa Monica, was because there's a massive amount of laser research that's being done down there. So I'm excited for this, but just like kind of everything else, like the quantum GPS story or pretty much anything related to quantum computing, we're still years away from seeing practical applications of this. And I think that, we kind of need to take this with a grain of salt. I'm excited to see where people are going to go with it, but it's going to be a while before I have a quantum computer in my pocket, or I'll just be able to think something and Alistair will be able to know what's going on instantaneously on the other side of the planet. So, stay tuned. If you've been paying attention in the space, there's been a lot of layoffs over the last few weeks. And now we're seeing some news from CompTIA that the US Bureau of Labor Statistics shows that over 200,000 fewer jobs exist in IT as of the end of April. There's a lot of uncertainty around the impact of tariffs in the United States. And that factor, among many, is leading employers to start to wait before they're looking to fill roles, because they never know if they're going to have to cut their payroll back even further. And of course, that means that economic uncertainties are really causing people to put their job prospects on hold and companies to put their hiring prospects on hold. But I guess the question is, Al, who's going to blink first when it comes to who's going to wait this out?
Well, I think that's going to be a real challenge, and that this is not a situation where people making business decision based on internal business elements. Having the huge uncertainty from the flip-flopping of tariffs has been very problematic. People keep hoping that it will settle, and it keeps being, well, things will push out a little further and a little further. Hiring staff is a long-term commitment. You don't typically get value from a new staff member for weeks, possibly months after they start in an organization. And so there is a pretty significant commitment time here for people for organizations to bring in new IT staff. I mean, the good news is the overall unemployment rate in IT is still significantly below the national unemployment rate. We're seeing 3.5% as the unemployment rate in IT, which is below the national rate that is escaping me right at the moment. Uh, we do also see that there are seasonal trends around employment and unemployment in IT. It is the bigger feeling that there is fallout from the wider economic situation of it's not exactly a boom time at the moment. Cost of living is biting people. That's the cost of supplies is biting organizations as well. And so delaying decisions where they're not clearly going to be beneficial is just continuing to be a a problem. And of course, it flows on from the end customers right through all of the businesses that supply those end customers, right to the back end of manufacturing of IT products as well. So it is going to be a challenge. It is going to be a challenge probably for months to come because we don't see this settling very fast. Hopefully, business organizations will start to commit to the things that are relatively low risk and maybe scaled back deployments. But I think it's going to be quite a while things are still tight, and they may well be a little slow to come back when they do return. So the other factor, of course, affecting this is the rise of AI as a way of making your existing staff more efficient, and that can be a bit of a challenge. I think it's a little overblown, the impact of AI taking away skilled jobs. I think there are other market movements that are changing what jobs are valuable, but certainly it's easier to get a job in AI and in AI infrastructure than potentially in first line support or maybe in new technologies as well. Linux is no stranger to being updated. Core functions of the operating system are constantly being rewritten and improved. And one of the biggest parts of the software is about to be upgraded in the forthcoming Ubuntu 25.10 release. The sudo command, used in order to make sure that your partner will make a sandwich for you, is used to temporarily change user privileges and run commands being run. The sudo command is used to temporarily change privileges, to run commands, and is being changed from the core new version to a new Rust-based version. I'm not sure that I want to sudo into a rusty sandwich being made by my partner, but that's an old joke. Why does Ubuntu think it needs to happen? According to the release, the core reason is security. Rust has better memory management and memory protection, which means that reduced chances for unplanned privilege escalation. The goal is for sudoers RS to be able to drop in replacement that won't break anything. How often do drop in replacements break nothing, Tom?
Very rarely, especially if you don't escalate privileges to drop them in. You know, the whole thing of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like, I get the idea behind this, right? Like if we write it in Rust, Rust has all these protected memory spaces and we can drop it in and we'll just rename it and it'll work the same way that it worked as the last one most of the time, except for that really weird corner case. Want to know one of the biggest problems they're worried about right now with this switch? The resulting command file's too big to just drop in because it turns out that when you write something in was this written in C? I don't remember if this was C or if this was in, I don't know, Pascal, or man, it could even be assembly language at this point. um Rust is just bigger. Like I get it, and we fought this. Like, all you got to do is jump on the kernel mailing list and wait about 3 months, and then someone who didn't do their homework is going to jump in and they're going to ask Linus, hey, we need to rewrite the kernel in C++ because it's better. Hey, we need to rewrite the kernel in Rust because it's better. Hey, we need to rewrite the kernel in, I don't know, JavaScript because it's better. And every single time the response comes back, no, if he even responds at all, because we've been down this road a number of times. The issue is that just because something is quote unquote better doesn't make it better. If you want proof of this, I want you to go onto your system and I want you to look at the timestamps or the date stamps on some of the commands that you're especially the low level applications that you're using. They're old, very old. Like, think about the command prompt on your system. I don't think cmd.exe has been modified for a very long time, other than maybe like changing the date stamp to match all the other files on the system when you upgrade from like Windows 10 to Windows 11. But the system is feature complete at this point. Why? Like, I get it. Like, people want tabs on their terminals and people want this and people want that. And there's plenty of drop-in replacements. I use one on my Mac instead of the terminal window, but that's just it. I am choosing to use a terminal program that's not the terminal because I don't want to try to replace the terminal, because I did that once on my Windows machine. I decided that I wanted to replace Notepad with a better version of Notepad. And all I did was drop my better version of Notepad into the system and rename it to Notepad EXE. And the amount of pain that I caused myself was way more than I should have. I get it, Ubuntu. You wanna tweak things. And let's be fair, we survived the system D nightmare, so this should not be that big of a deal. But I need this to be bulletproof before you guys decide that this is done. Because if you screw this up, there's no way to come back from it. Well, I mean, unless you run as root, in which case, more power to you. We had a story we wanted to take a closer look at, and it comes from the Futurum Group because last week saw the release of a big new report around cybersecurity. Our Futurum Research Division says that the market is going to be growing by 11.6% per year for the rest of the decade. And by then, it should be worth nearly $300 billion. dollars. In a quote for the linked article, Fernando Montenegro says that cybersecurity is a cornerstone of the boardroom and a key part of enterprise risk management strategies. And additionally, the report has a lot of great suggestions and information about which areas of security need to be addressed by organizations in the coming years. Now, Al, you and I both touch security quite frequently because, well, it's part of everybody's job now. But I was wondering if you had some thoughts about this report and kind of what it might mean for the wider security industry.
Well, the report is some nice in-depth analysis of market segregated across different geographic regions, including the APAC region where I live, but also segmented by industry and then by software delivery mechanisms. So it's a pretty comprehensive piece of research, and that foundation in lots of backwards looking also helps with the forwards looking. I always like predictions that are based on some sort of views of the past as well as some insights and other changes. Uh, Definitely, the idea that the security market is going to grow shouldn't be a surprise for anyone. We know that there is no reduction in risk going on around us. The internet continues to be a dangerous place, and your employees continue to be a significant risk to you as well. So, seeing areas of risk management as a part of the overall cybersecurity approach being a place that the report is pointing towards that Fernando and Cresta case, pointing towards risk management and identity management as being important. I think the identity management one is really crucial because as we're seeing more and more use of hybrid cloud and multi cloud, the need to identify somebody uniformly across all of those different locations where they might act is really vital in order to get a consistent security stance. You have to know the actors, who's taking what action. So that focus on both risk management and identity management is absolutely strong. Uh, in terms of delivery mechanisms, that's one of the interesting findings in here is the growth has been a lot in cloud delivered um, security and cybersecurity tools. There are a number of places where having these tools as a managed service running in a secured cloud location is very beneficial, but also, as I mentioned, that's the hybrid cloud, multi-cloud. It makes sense to deliver these your cybersecurity solutions through those hybrid and multi-cloud locations. Of course, you have to deliver security in all of the locations you're operating, not just in the cloud. And so, on premises deployment and software deployment into maybe public cloud instances is absolutely in there as well. Uh, there's some advice in here for both vendors wanting to get out in front of this and be part of that 10% compounding growth for the rest of the decade, as well as to end customer organizations who need to consider really planning for an increase in the complexity and cost of their security implementations over time. Tom, you're very much deeply into the security of security with your security field day events. What is your view on this lovely report from Futurum?
So I love the fact that we went out and we found a lot of decision makers who are talking about the things that they're happening. One of the things in the report that I thought was really impactful was how impactful security events are. We think about this like, I've seen news stories about how important it is to have quantum resistant encryption now because the likelihood of RSA being completely broken in the next few years is higher than it needs to be and this and this and this. And then I go look at the report and things that people are really worried about, things that have had the most impact, cloud security problems. like buckets not being secured properly or someone losing their credentials. Good old fashioned ransomware. Hey, we do ransomware stories all the time around here, right? Something that you probably think about, but you don't really think about: social engineering and phishing. Like, look, I got an email today that came in with the right email address, but just something felt off about it, right? It's like, go over here and click here. And obviously you did this. And you're like, huh, something doesn't feel right. And so I start doing the research, and I even went over, I did what every security researcher is supposed to do. I typed in the address of the service that I was using as opposed to clicking on any of the links in the email. Sure enough, it was bogus, but it stands to reason that most of the people who are not super security savvy in your organization might have fallen for that. But how do you teach that? Like, how do you teach people to secure S3 buckets properly? How do you prevent them from exfiltrating data? Like, these, as sophisticated as the attacks get, like, believe me, when we do the research for these rundowns, like, there was one the other day. It was like, well, we can pick out your password based on the acoustics of the keyboard that you're typing on. Okay, that's like some James Bond level stuff. And I always go back to the XKCD of, like, using polymorphic encryption to guess the guy's password. And then the next panel, it's like, let's just beat him with a wrench until he gives us the password. Like, that's what we're dealing with here. It's low tech, it's effective. And these are the kinds of controls that need to be put in place. And that's one of the things that the report goes into detail about, as you've mentioned, is the interaction of things like IAM with cloud security and data protection and endpoint protection, because we are long past the days of antivirus. If you think that people still run antivirus on their machines, you need to read this report, because it's really EDR, endpoint detection and response. And even that is kind of an old way of looking at it, because we moved into new areas where the endpoints work with the rest of the infrastructure to prevent these things from happening. I mean, if I'd have had the ability to prevent code execution on my laptop, 15 years ago, when I was still doing this for a living, my life would have been a whole lot easier. And so I think it's valuable for people who are kind of curious about where the direction of the market is headed, should definitely take a look at this report. I know Krista and Fernando and the rest of the team over at the Futurum Research Division have put a lot of effort into this, and you're going to be seeing a lot about it over the next few weeks. So do yourself a favor, go register for the report. The link will be in the show notes. Take a look through it, and I promise that you won't be disappointed with any of the information that you find. Another thing that will not disappoint you is all of the great events that we have running here at Tech Field Day. There's actually one going on this week. We are going to be doing the Tech Field Day experience at Click Connect 2025 in sunny Orlando, Florida. Stephen is down there right now with the folks from Click. There'll be some great videos coming out very soon with some of the discussions that they've been having. And then we will be back at the end of the month, May 29th and 30th, for Security Field Day. We have a wonderful lineup of presenters who are ready to bring you some critical information that you need to know about the state of enterprise security. And we're going to have some great conversations and some fun discussions going on there. The next week, Al's back in the States because he has something coming up. Al, what are you going to be working on?
I'll be back in the States, and I will be back at San Francisco Airport and nearly adjacent to there when we have Cloud Field Day returning with a whole bunch of interesting vendors. There seems to be a bunch of storage components and maybe some networking to be had in your hybrid multi-cloud. Check it out on the 4th and 5th of June.
And be sure that you tune in for the rundown every Wednesday. We love recording the Tech Field Day rundown for you. Whether you catch us right when we get published on YouTube, whether you're listening to us in your podcast feed while you're mowing the yard, or maybe possibly even typing out an email on your porch and getting some sun. We love that. Make sure you head over to techstrong.it to check out the show notes. We have links to all the articles that we pulled and sourced things. And don't forget that the link to sign up for that future research report is there as well. You can also check out all of the other great things that we do by checking out techstrong.tv as well as futurumgroup.com. We have a lot of great resources there that you want to check out. We will also be back next Wednesday with more great rundown news. We hope that you'll be able to tune in then. Until then, for myself, Tom Hollingsworth, for Alistair Cook, Stephen Foskett, and everybody who works really hard to make the Tech Field Day rundown happen, enjoy the rest of your Wednesday, and we'll see you soon.